This is an old tale that was recorded by the English folklorist and author of the Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling. It's about a beautiful woman who is actually a snake spirit. And it's also about the man she loves. He can't possibly love her back because he doesn't even know she's alive. It begins one evening when a hunter named Parvati is strolling through the forest. He's just had a big fight with his wife. She threw him out of the house after he killed a snake that was living in their courtyard. It was a huge serpent, and it charmed them by curling up on the hearth rug, warming itself by the fire, and glaring at them with eyes like red-hot coals. But Parvati didn't care for any animal that slithered and hissed, so he beat it to death with a stick. This enraged his wife, who was apparently sympathetic to the snake's plight, so she threw her husband out into the night. And there in the forest, beneath the shade of a big tree, Parvati built himself a little hut from dry leaves. Then he lay down to sleep, only to be awakened by a terrible storm. Winds howled, lightning flashed, and when he looked up, he saw the most magnificent snake spirit rising up into the sky. Her scales were white as snow, her eyes shone like golden coins. She coiled herself around the branch of the tree above him, hissing and spitting fire. Of course, poor Parvati thought this was the end of the world, and the snake spirit laughed at him, saying, "Ha ha, mortal, do you fear me? Do not fear, for I am here to help you." She told him that she'd been the snake in his courtyard, and now she wanted to repay him for his kindness in killing her by making him rich. In fact, she would give him all the riches that were hidden inside her coils. Then, taking the form of a beautiful woman, she slithered down the tree and melted away into the forest. Now, I don't know if this was love at first sight, but Parvati went wandering after her, and soon enough he found her sitting on a stone in front of a cave. Again, she asked him if he feared her, and again, he said no. In fact, he said he admired her beauty, and she should have been flattered, but she was annoyed by his stupidity. "I'm not just a beautiful woman," she said. "I'm a powerful magic being, and you are just a foolish man. Yet you claim not to fear me." "Very well, let us make a bargain." She laid down her terms. For 365 days, she would live in his house as his wife. But for the 366th day, he must take her back to the forest and leave her at the edge of the village. If he agreed, he would be granted untold riches. But if he broke his promise, she would be his for eternity. And despite his friend's warnings that the deal sounded cursed, Parvati accepted. The next day, he led the snake spirit back to his village and presented her to his family. Even though she was very beautiful, his mother and sister did entwite her and tried to persuade their son and brother to send her back to the forest immediately, but he stood firm. His wife returned, they were reconciled, and the snake spirit moved into their home. For an entire year, life was blissful. The snake spirit took care of the household, cooked delicious food, spun fine clothes, and delighted her husband. She was gentle and kind and graceful, and the villagers marveled at her beauty. They brought her offerings of flowers and incense and bowed before her as she passed by, because everyone knew she was a supernatural being. Even Parvati's mother and sister treated her respectfully, and they had to, because when the snake spirit so much as lifted a finger, an unseen force made them tremble. She seemed particularly fond of Parvati's mother, whom she would massage with fragrant oils and braid the old woman's hair. Only Parvati's young sister remained skeptical. She hated the way people bowed before the snake spirit, and she hated the way her older sister-in-law seemed to control their house. And when her brother warned her not to disrespect the snake spirit, she merely laughed at him. Meanwhile, the months went by, and the snake spirit became more and more attached to Parvati. She would sit by his side and tell him stories of the forest, or she would coil around him while he slept. And sometimes she would take the form of a great white snake and dance and play in the fields. She loved him so much, in fact, that after a year had passed, she forgot all about their bargain. And when she remembered, she was horrified. On the other hand, Parvati hadn't forgotten. In fact, he'd been counting the days, and now that the 366th day had come, he was ready to fulfill his part of the bargain. When the sun rose, he got up and told his wife that it was time to go. At first, she refused. She shed tears, she threw herself on the ground, and she begged him to keep her as his wife. But Parvati couldn't go back on his word. He helped her to her feet, and together they left the village. When they reached the edge of the forest, Parvati began to feel guilty. Maybe he could have broken the bargain, he thought. After all, what did a year of happiness amount to if it meant losing the love of his life? But then the snake spirit stopped him. She looked him in the eyes and said, "Do not grieve, my love. You have kept our bargain. I cannot ask for more. Now, farewell, my human husband." Then she slithered into the trees and disappeared. And their Parvati's story might have ended, except that his young sister-in-law wasn't done with it yet. While Parvati had been gone, she had spoken to the village priest, and now they stood together at the edge of the forest waiting for the snake spirit to appear. When she did, the sister stepped forward and said, "Hold, evil spirit. We know who you are. We know what you've done, and we demand that you return to your true form." She waved a charm that the priest had given her, and it emitted a loud buzz. Startled, the snake spirit recoiled, but then she laughed. "Do I look like an evil spirit to you?" she asked. "How dare you insult me?" The priest began to chant, and the snake spirit grew afraid. "Begone!" which the sister shouted. "Leave our village at once." Taking the form of a huge white snake, the snake spirit lashed out at them, but the priest was ready. He waved his charm and struck her with a wooden mallet. The snake spirit collapsed and turned back into a woman. Then the priest tied her hands behind her back and dragged her toward the village. She struggled against her bonds, but it was no use. Soon enough, the villagers had gathered, and when they saw the snake spirit bound and kneeling before them, they too began to chant and shout, "Leave our village, witch! Leave our village, witch! Leave our village, witch!" Parvati wanted to defend her, but when he tried to speak, he found that he couldn't utter a sound. All he could do was watch helplessly as the priest dragged the snake spirit away. He ran after them, calling her name, and soon he found her lying inside an abandoned hut. She was still tied up, and her eyes were dull with defeat. "Don't give up," he told her. "I won't let them hurt you." But she shook her head. "You can't save me now," she whispered. "They're going to kill me." As the priest approached, Parvati pushed the snake spirit behind him and stepped forward. "Let me take your curse," he said. "I don't care if I die." The priest looked at him in surprise. "Curse?" he asked. "What curse?" Parvati realized then that the priest didn't know about the bargain, and so he told him everything. When he finished speaking, the priest was deeply ashamed. He fell to his knees and begged the snake spirit for forgiveness. Then he untied her bonds and embraced her. "I had no idea that you were a great magic being," he said. I am sorry. But the snake spirit only shook her head. "It is not your fault," she said, "but my time in this world is done. Take these flowers," she continued, handing him a bouquet of white lilies, "and cast them into the river. Then return to your village and start a new life. As for me, my work here is finished." With that, she vanished. Poor Parvati was heartbroken, but he did as she asked. He cast the lilies into the river and returned to his village. There he met his mother and sisters, and they all grieved for the loss of the snake spirit. His mother, in fact, died of a broken heart. And though Parvati survived many years, he never recovered from the loss of his beloved. And so we see that no matter how devoted a woman may be, if she's a snake, she's doomed to an eternity of sorrow. The end. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out my podcast, where I explore similar themes. Thanks for listening.